zoom in. Emily was mid-laugh. Not elegant, not staged. Just real. He didn't understand it. I'll do it. The room quieted a second too long. Jason blinked. What? I'll marry her. He walked past them, setting his empty cow whisperer. Laughter resumed, louder this time. But David had already turned away. He walked toward the hallway, his pace measured, but his beneath the ribs. In the master bedroom, a soft knock came a few minutes later. "Come in," David said, already loosening his tie. Wallace, his longtime house manager, stepped inside quietly, hands folded. He looked out of place in the sleek modernism of the room, an old man carved from slower days. "You know, when you were 17, you told me you'd marry someone who knew how to make real bread, not eat it at gala fundraisers." David smiled faintly, looking down at his cufflinks. "I said a lot of foolish things when I was 17. Wallace tilted his head. "Not foolish, just honest." As Wallace turned to leave, he added softly, "Sometimes the most expensive bet is the one that feels like nothing at first." After the door clicked shut, David sat in silence. He pulled up Emily's photo again. Her hair was messy, her laugh crooked. The background was all fence posts, blue sky and open air. The pasture, silver threads winding through the grass like whispers. A rooster cried in the distance, lazy and late, while the sun peeked over the edge. Emily Dawson wiped her brow with the sleeve of her flannel. "You're greedy today, Daisy," she muttered, patting the side of the old cow. "We'll have to ration oats if you keep cheating your sisters." The cow blinked slowly, unimpressed. Outside the barn, wool crunched under boots. Emily glanced up to see Mandy, her neighbor and unofficial best friend, leaning over the fence with a coffee mug in one hand and a mischievous smile. "You got an email from a man in California?" Emily raised a brow. "You snooping through my inbox now?" "Nope. Your mum's the one hollering about it like it's a telegram from the president." Mandy grinned. Emily's heart paused a beat before resuming like nothing happened. She stood, brushing straw off her jeans. "Probably spam," she said, "or one of those fake job interviews that ends with someone asking for my social." "Or," Mandy said, drawing the word out, "he's that David Miller, the one who started Miller Tech. The one who dated the perfume heiress with the eyebrows. Emily snorted. At least check. Might give you something to laugh about later. By the time Emily got back to the farmhouse, her mother had already printed the email and placed it on the kitchen table like an official court summons. "It's probably nothing," Emily said, scanning the lines. "Just a vague invitation to a..." He was, slick hair, sharper suits, the whole billionaire package. She paused on one image. He stood on a stage, flanked by executives, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I doubt he knows how." Her mum glanced sideways at her. "But you're still going to take the call." Emily hesitated, then shrugged. "Why not? If it's a mistake, I'll hang up. If not, well, we'll see." Later that evening, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop propped just barely in the frame. She wore a grey wool sweater with a frayed cuff and kept her hair tied back in a simple braid. The call connected. The screen shifted, and there he was. David Miller sat in a room so clean and sterile, it looked like it had been photoshopped. Behind him, "Not interviewing for anything. I already have a job." He nodded. "I know." Emily folded her arms. "And I'm not a model, or an influencer, or whatever it is men like you usually call at night." David leaned back slightly. "That's why I called you. You don't talk like most rich people," she said finally. "I don't feel like one tonight," he replied. There was a pause. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "You're terrible at small talk, you know." He looked amused for the first time. "I've heard that before." She glanced off screen, then back. "All right then, Mr. Miller. What do you actually want from me?" He realized he couldn't say it. Not like this. Not yet. "Conversation," he said. "To start." Emily studied him. Then, slowly, she leaned in closer to the camera. "Okay, then here's my half of the deal. No games, no mystery, just talk like a person." Somewhere outside, a cricket started its evening song. Inside, two people from different worlds sat across screens, saying nothing for a moment, but not hanging up. The silence wasn't awkward, it was open. Emily didn't know what to make of him. He was polished, yes, but he blinked like someone tired, spoke carefully, like a man who This wasn't a game. Not tonight. Not yet. And neither of them reached to end the call. Before we get into the next part, I would love to know what country you are listening to the video in. The glass door. Marble floors stretched ahead like a lake of light, polished to a fault, reflecting chandeliers that sparkled with artificial constellations. The lobby hummed with quiet opulence, voices low, movements smooth, every sound buffered by expense. Emily stepped in with her backpack slung just the feeling of being off-tempo. Like everyone here danced to a song she didn't know. A young man behind the reception desk looked up, smile perfectly measured. "Good afternoon, ma'am. May I help you?" She adjusted the strap on her shoulder. "I'm here to check in. David Miller made the reservation." His eyes did a quick sweep. Sweater, faded jeans, no luggage besides a canvas bag. His smile didn't falter, but it narrowed just a little. "Miller Suite," he repeated, tapping at the screen. "I'll need ID." Emily pulled out her license and handed it over. The pause as he read it was too short to mean anything, but it meant something. The man, Anthony, finally handed it back. "Rooms on the 34th floor. Elevators to your right." She offered a smile. "Thanks, Anthony." He blinked, surprised. "You're welcome, Miss Dawson." As she turned, she caught the faintest whisper behind the desk. Emily stepped into the elevator, hit the button marked Penthouse, and let the door shut. 34 floors up, the doors opened to a private hallway with a single, matte black door at the end. David was already there, leaning casually against the wall, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when she stepped out, then stood straighter. "You found it," he said. Emily looked around. "Hard to miss. This place has fewer rooms than my barn." He smiled, faint, real. She stepped in as he opened the suite. The door gave way to a space larger than her entire house. Hardwood floors stretched into soft rugs. Art she didn't understand, hung from textured walls, and windows taller than trees, opened onto a skyline so wide it made her dizzy. "You okay?" David asked from behind her. She turned slowly. "I thought this was the living room." He raised a brow. "It is." She gestured toward the hallway. "Then what's that room with the chandelier over a stone tub?" "That's the bathroom." Emily stared at him. "Jesus." David watched her expression, then laughed under his breath. "Your world's ridiculous," she said, walking forward. "I've been thinking the same," he murmured. A moment later, a hotel staff member wheeled in her single duffel bag on a gold cart and bowed so deeply Emily thought he might fall over. She blinked. "I could have carried that," she said. He straightened with a practiced smile. "Of course, ma'am." David tipped him, then shut the door. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, which had more pillows than she'd seen in her entire life. "I don't know what half of these buttons do," she muttered, eyeing the bedside panel. "That one turns on the fireplace," David offered. "There's a fireplace," she said, as it roared softly to life behind the glass. Dinner was booked downstairs. David had mentioned it casually, but Emily had protested. "I can't eat at some place where the bread costs more than my phone bill." "Then, I'll order the bread," he'd said. Still, she humored him. The dining room sparkled like the lobby. Everything gold, white, too many forks. She picked the wrong spoon for her appetizer, stabbed at a leaf that turned out to be decorative, and almost choked on cold soup. David said nothing, just leaned over at one point and switched her utensils quietly. She smirked. "You can laugh. Go ahead." He looked at her with something like softness. "I'm not sure. I remember how." Later, in the elevator ride up, she leaned against the wall and looked at him. "I think that waiter thought I found you on some dating app." David glanced sideways. "He thinks you rescued me." They both smiled, small, knowing. Back in the suite, she dropped onto the couch with a sigh and toed off her boots. David stood by the window, hands in his pockets. She watched him for a long second, then said, "Do you ever get tired of all this polish He didn't answer right away. "More than I thought I would," he said. Emily leaned her head back against the cushion, watching the city glow outside. "Where I'm from, when things shine that much, it usually means a storm's coming." David turned to look at her. Something passed between them. Not flirtation, not yet warmth, just a pause. One honest breath before the next step into a world neither of them knew how to belong to. The ballroom gleamed like a stage set for a fantasy, all crystal chandeliers and champagne towers, every corner polished into perfection. Music floated gently from a string quartet, and servers moved like shadows, delivering delicate plates of food no one touched. Outside the tall windows, San Francisco's skyline faded into early dusk, but the air inside was bright with expensive perfume and sharper intentions. Emily stood in a corner of the room, her hands lightly folded in front of her, trying not to fidget with the edge of her dress. It wasn't white. Not really. It was cream, a shade David said suited her better. Simple, soft, with sleeves she liked, and no sparkle. She hadn't wanted a veil. There was no aisle, no guests from her side. Just David's world, dressed in silk and secrets. A waiter passed by, and she caught the trace of a whisper behind her. "Is that the bride?" a woman asked someone nearby. "I thought she was a staff. She looks rural." Emily turned slowly. They weren't whispering quietly enough. Across the room, Ava approached in stilettos that clicked like a warning. "You look comfortable," Ava said, her eyes doing a full sweep of Emily's figure. "I am," Emily replied evenly. Ava smiled tightly. "That's good. Weddings should be comfortable, though most people dress up a bit more, especially when they're marrying someone like David." Emily offered a dry smile. "Funny. Most people don't bring their exes to the altar either." Ava blinked, caught for a second, then recovered. "Well, I suppose tonight is full of surprises." Emily turned away before Ava could say anything else. She scanned the room, looking for David, but he was pulled to a corner by Jason and two others she didn't recognize. Jason leaned in, voice lowered, not knowing Emily was drifting closer. The music swelled, plates clinked, but she caught it clearly. "So, how long do you have to stay married before the bet counts?" "A month." "2 question mark. Emily froze. There was laughter, quiet, cruel. David said nothing. Her stomach dropped, like the floor beneath her had suddenly vanished. She didn't move right away, just stood there, the edges of the voices around her blurring into white noise. Then she set her glass down carefully on a nearby tray and stepped away. No drama, no tears. Just her boots hitting the tile, one step at a time, toward the hallway outside. She made it as far as the exit before David found her. "Emily," he started. She didn't turn. "How long?" Her voice was calm. Too calm. David stopped a few feet behind her. "You heard him." "I heard you say nothing." He hesitated. "I was about to." "That's not the same." The door behind them opened again. Someone laughed. Jason's voice, loud, unbothered. David looked back, jaw tight. Emily shook her head. "I don't belong in there. And you don't belong with me." Maybe that was the point. Before he could speak, the silence shattered inside. Glass. A single sharp crack echoed from the ballroom. David turned sharply and stormed back in. The room quieted. Heads turned. He reached the center where Jason stood mid-laugh. "What did you say?" David's voice was low, deadly still. Jason raised his brows. "I was joking." "No, you weren't." David picked up his wine glass, paused, and with a sudden force, slammed it against the marble floor. The sound exploded, shards spraying like punctuation. Ava flinched. "Everyone out," David said, voice flat, cold. "Now." The silence was stunned. Max coughed. "You're not serious." "I said get out." David stepped forward. "You came to laugh. You can do that somewhere else." No one moved. He pointed to the door. "You, all of you, out." It wasn't a request. Chairs scraped awkwardly. Murmurs floated. The room, once so poised, now cracked with discomfort. Jason looked like he wanted to say something else, but thought better of it. Within minutes, the ballroom was nearly empty. The quartet had stopped playing. Waiters stood still, waiting for instruction. David turned. Emily was in the doorway, watching. Their eyes met across the abandoned celebration. She didn't speak, just looked at him. Really looked. He crossed the space slowly. "I didn't defend you fast enough," he said. "That's on me." "You didn't need to throw them out," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "I did." Silence. She let out a shaky breath. "I don't want to be a prize, David, or a joke, or part of a story people tell after dessert." "You're not." His voice broke slightly. "You're the only real thing I've touched in years." Emily didn't answer right away. Then she looked around the hollow room. "There's cake," she said softly. David blinked. "What?" "In the corner," she gestured. "You bought a cake. We should at least try a slice." And just like that, her voice grounded them. They walked to the cake table, now lonely and untouched. David picked up the knife. "Do we do this together?" Emily gave a half smile. "Why not? We already burned the rest of the script." He cut them each a piece. Chocolate, rich, surprisingly good. She took a bite. "This might be the fanciest mistake I've ever made." David looked at her quiet. "It's not a mistake." Emily chewed slowly, swallowed. "I don't know if I can be enough for your world," she said. "You're not supposed to fit into my world," he said. "I think I'm supposed to leave it." She studied him, eyes searching. Maybe this wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something just as fragile. Something that had survived its first storm. The road stretched long and silent, flanked by wide fields browned with late summer. The horizon was unbroken, except for the distant line of trees and the occasional wooden fence leaning with age. Wind stirred the dry grass, carrying with it the scent of dust, hay, and something unmistakably clean. David stood at the edge of the Dawson farmhouse porch, still in his city shoes, one hand shading his eyes as he watched Emily unload bags from the back of her truck. "This is it?" he asked, not unkindly, just surprised. Emily didn't look up. "You expecting a red carpet?" "Number maybe just something paved," she smirked. "Around here, pavements for parking lots and caskets." He followed her inside. The house was old, but not worn out, just lived in. Every surface had a purpose. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and wood smoke. The floor creaked in the hallway, and the windows groaned in their frames when the wind changed. Helen, Emily's mother, was setting a kettle on the stove when they walked in. She glanced at David briefly, then at his shoes. "You'll want boots," she said, by way of greeting. David nodded. "Noted." Helen didn't smile, but she poured 3 mugs of tea and handed one to him anyway. "We get up at 5. Cows don't care what title you used to have." That night, David slept in the guest room. Small, clean, no view but a field of corn. The mattress was firm. The air smelled like rain-soaked earth. No hum of elevators, no city light leaking through curtains. Just dark, pure and whole. At 5 a.m., someone knocked once on his door. He sat up, disoriented. Outside, Emily was already in boots and a hoodie, pulling her hair into a bun. "Come on," she said. "They won't wait." They walked to the barn in silence. Mist hung low over the grass, and cows moved slowly in their pens, blinking at the day. David tried to help. He really did, but when Emily handed him a pail and a stool, he just stared at it. "You don't sit on it," she said. "You sit next to it." He adjusted. Tried again. Milk splattered the side of the bucket, and not much else. Emily hid a smile. "You're squeezing like a man signing a merger." David frowned. "This is harder than negotiating with the Taiwanese." "You ever cut onions?" she asked later, back in the kitchen. He blinked. "Not personally." She slid a knife toward him. "Learn." He chopped cautiously, missed half the onion, winced when the first tear hit. "Am I crying?" he asked. Emily handed him a towel. "Welcome to humility." They ate scrambled eggs and toast with thick jam from a jar labeled Mandy's Peach 2022. David stared at the toast like it had been grown from magic. "This is really good," he said. Emily raised an eyebrow. "It's bread." "No," he said slowly. "It's food that tastes like someone meant it." That afternoon, he tried raking hay, then hosing down the porch, then helping Helen string beans on the back steps. Each task was simple, but unfamiliar. His hands, used to holding glass and pens, ached in new places. Helen finally spoke as she handed him another bucket. "You'll get sore." "I already am." "You'll get better," she said, then paused. "If you stay." He met her eyes. "I intend to." She looked at him a long moment, then went back to her beans. That evening, the lights flickered once, then went out completely. David stepped into the hallway, holding his phone like a flashlight. "Did we lose power?" he called. "Generator's been out for years," Emily said from the living room. "Storm must have clipped the line." He stared at his phone. No signal. No Wi-Fi. Emily lit a candle on the windowsill. Her face glowed soft in the flicker. "Welcome to night." He sat beside her on the couch, listening to the crickets outside. "There's something alive about the silence here," he said after a while. She turned to him. "It doesn't hide anything." A beetle buzzed near the glass. The wind moved through the fields, like breath. David exhaled. "I spent years in a tower of noise. People talking but saying nothing, signing deals that changed lives I'd never meet." Emily said nothing, just waited. He continued. "You ever feel full of everything except what matters?" She nodded. "Sometimes. But here, it empties out. Eventually." He glanced at her. "I'm scared I won't know what to do with what's left." "You'll learn," she said. He looked down at his hands, blistered now, red and rough. Then, without thinking, he picked up an old notebook from the coffee table, one Emily had used for grocery lists and chicken feed notes. He flipped to a clean page. "First night," he wrote. "Silence had weight. It didn't crush me, it held me." He stared at the words, not for work, not for public, just for him. Emily leaned over, reading upside down. "That's new," she said. David nodded. "So is breathing without drowning." She smiled at him. "You'll get better." Outside, the stars began to come out, not hidden behind glass or neon signs, but bold and unapologetic, like something David had never dared to be. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to leave. 1 year passed. Life had settled into something soft between them, the kind of quiet rhythm that didn't ask for more than shared chores, long walks, and coffee poured without needing to ask. Emily came home from the clinic with Madeline in her arms, and now another change was coming. She was pregnant. The morning light filtered through the old farmhouse curtains in ribbons, soft and golden, warming the wooden floors one board at a time. Birds were already loud outside, their chatter a steady rhythm beneath the creak of porch steps and rustle of wind through corn. Inside, the kitchen smelled faintly of sage and lemon soap. David stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, elbow deep in suds. The plates clinked softly against porcelain as he rinsed each one. His movements were careful, practiced now, not graceful, but no longer clumsy. Behind him, Emily sat at the kitchen table, barefoot, her rounded belly resting lightly beneath her folded hands. She watched him in silence, a soft smile curving one side of her mouth. "You're getting good at that," she said. David turned, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Repetition is a brutal teacher." She sipped from a chipped ceramic mug. "What are you making in the barn?" He hesitated. "Something. Secret? Hope." She blinked. "That's dangerously poetic for 8 a.m. David smirked and disappeared out the back door. Out in the barn, the project waited on a makeshift workbench. Planks of sanded pine, hand-cut joints, screws laid out with the precision of a man who once signed billion-dollar contracts. He'd watched half a dozen YouTube tutorials, downloaded in town when the internet worked, and started building the cradle 2 weeks ago. It was his quiet rebellion against the man he used to be, the man who once outsourced emotion and scheduled affection in 30-minute blocks. Now, he measured, soared, adjusted, by hand, for someone he hadn't even met yet. At lunch, Mandy stopped by, bringing pickled okra and gossip in equal parts. "You're glowing," she told Emily. "I'm sweaty." And glowing. She eyed David, who was scrubbing under his fingernails with a bristle brush. "And you're still here. Color me shocked." David gave a polite nod. 1 full year. Mandy raised an eyebrow. "Do you miss it? The city, the noise, your throne?" He paused. "Sometimes. Then I hear the screen door slam and see her toes on the kitchen floor, and it fades." Emily blinked, then smiled quietly to herself. That evening, David pulled a book from the shelf, The Expectant Father, and read by lamplight. He took notes in a leather-bound journal, things the baby might like, things he hoped not to mess up. He wrote like someone who had just started speaking a language and wasn't sure if he was getting the tenses right. Across the room, Emily stitched the corner of a quilt. She didn't look up, just said softly, "You're not David Miller anymore, you know." He glanced at her. "I know. You don't even wear a watch." He held up his wrist, bare. "You used to hate uncertainty." "I still do," he said, "but I like this kind." They sat in silence after that. Later, after Emily had gone to bed, he stayed behind, sanding the curved headboard of the cradle. Outside, rain whispered against the windows. Inside, the candle flickered beside the notebook, where he wrote again. Day 311. "You're the size of a mango. Your mom says you kicked after I fell asleep reading about diaper rash. If you're anything like her, you'll keep me guessing. I think I want that." He closed the book gently, tucked it under the cradle. On one crisp Sunday, Helen caught him mending a seam on Emily's work dress. Clumsy stitches, but earnest ones. She raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think you knew how to sew." David shrugged. "She wore this when we planted beans. I figured it's earned some respect." Helen handed him a better needle. "If you're going to stay, stay real. Don't play house." "I'm not," he said. "I burned mine down." She nodded. "Good." That week, David finished the cradle. He called Emily out to the barn and said nothing. Just let her see it. She ran her fingers along the smooth grain, knelt beside it, eyes shining but dry. "Did you build this?" she whispered. "No," he said. "I built something that can hold a heartbeat." Emily looked up at him. "I don't recognize you." David smiled. "Good." That night, when the house was dark and the only sound was the wind, he leaned close to her belly and whispered, "You're coming into a world that's loud and messy. But your mum is light in 1,000 windows, and I'm building walls thick enough to hold that light for you. Emily stirred, but didn't wake. He rested his head beside her and let the silence hold them both. Love, he was starting to understand, wasn't a declaration. It was dishwater and sawdust, peach jam and clumsy stitches. It was staying and building and learning how to be small in a world that suddenly felt wide. The phone rang just after dawn. David stood barefoot in the kitchen, a mug of black coffee cooling between his palms. The name on the screen made his chest tighten. Dr. Halbrook. David, came the voice on the other end. Steady, measured. It's your mother. She took a fall last night. Nothing broken, but she's not bouncing back like she used to. David leaned against the counter, heart already racing. How bad? She asked for you. That should tell you. A long silence passed. I'll be there tonight, David said. Los Angeles bled light through glass and metal, every surface polished to a sterile gleam. Car horns barked below, muffled by tinted windows and too much altitude. David stood behind the tinted glass of his hotel suite, blazer pressed, shoes clean, but he felt like someone wearing someone else's skin. He hadn't been in LA for 15 minutes before the weight returned. The pressure, the noise, the version of himself he thought he'd buried. His phone buzzed. Jason. David ignored it. Another buzz, then a knock. He turned, sighed, and opened the door. Jason walked in like he still owned the place. Sharp suit, smug smirk, phone already in hand. You look like you just crawled out of a barn, he said, eyes scanning David's open collar, worn shoes. I did, David replied, flat. Jason let out a laugh. Still doing the cowboy cosplay thing? David didn't respond. He walked past him, poured a glass of water, drank it slowly. So, Jason continued, how's our little project? David looked up. Jason's smile thinned. Don't give me that look. We both know why this started. David set the glass down with more weight than necessary. That's not who I am anymore. Jason rolled his eyes. Please, you don't just wake up one day and become Farmer John. This was always a phase. A really long, really weird midlife crisis. David's jaw flexed. Jason pushed further. Don't tell me you actually love her. Silence. David, he turned, voice low. If she's a project, then she's the best investment I've ever made. Most profitable, too. Jason blinked. You serious? David walked to the window, looking out. I never used to sleep through the night. Now I do. That has value, doesn't it? Jason scoffed. Therapy could have done the same. No, David said quietly. Therapy wouldn't have smelled like wet earth and cinnamon. Jason didn't know what to do with that. David checked his watch. He hadn't worn it in months. It felt foreign, ticking too loudly. I came back for my mother, he said. Not for this. Jason leaned on the armrest. How is she? Resting, lucid, but tired. There was a pause. Jason asked, almost gently. She asked about your wife. David nodded. She called her that girl who stole my son from his skyline. Jason laughed. She always had a way with guilt. David didn't smile. Then she asked if I'd bring Emily next time. That quieted Jason. Outside, traffic pulsed like a machine. David grabbed his jacket. I'm going to the hospital. Jason stood. Reporters have been sniffing around since you landed. They're asking about her, about you leaving. David paused in the doorway. Then tell them I left the noise for a name. And I'm not looking back. At the hospital, his mother was propped up by pillows, pale but alert. Her hands trembled when she reached for his. You look thinner, she whispered. I work more now, he said. In a field? He smiled. It's honest work. She studied him. Your hands have calluses. David said nothing. "And your eyes," she continued, "are quieter." He nodded. "That's her doing." His mother looked at the ceiling. "I wanted you to marry a woman with silver spoons and a bloodline." "I did," David said. "She just uses the spoons to stir soup." She turned her head slowly, met his gaze. "Bring her next time." "I will." Back at the hotel, reporters swarmed outside. Microphones, flashes, noise. "Mr. Miller, is it true you've abandoned the board? Is your wife still milking cows?" David stopped. "If you think hard work is embarrassing," he said, voice calm, "then maybe you've forgotten what built this country." They shouted more questions, but he walked on, phone to his ear. Emily picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" she asked. "LA smells like bleach and power," he said. "I prefer compost and wildflowers." He chuckled. "So do I." There was a beat of silence. "I miss you," she said. David leaned against the wall, eyes closed. "I miss me, the one you see. Then come home." "I will. Soon." Another pause. "Did the cradle hold up?" he asked. "It's perfect. It squeaks a little." "So do I." She laughed. He soaked in the sound. Later that night, David walked past the glass boardroom where he'd once reigned. He stopped, watching the reflection of himself in the polished window. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like a man who'd found something better than kingdoms. He placed a hand on the glass, whispered, "You built this," and almost missed the only thing that mattered. And then he walked away. Not back toward the elevators, not toward the tower, but toward something quieter. Toward home. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds in thin, tired streaks, casting soft shadows across the Dawson kitchen floor. A breeze stirred the curtains gently, carrying the distant sound of chickens and the low rumble of a tractor somewhere out beyond the fields. Inside, the silence was brittle, like something had cracked and no one had dared to touch it yet. Emily stood at the table, a small open box in front of her. It had arrived that morning from a college friend who now lived in San Diego. Baby socks, a onesie with tiny carrots printed across it, and beneath them, a folded newspaper page. She hadn't meant to read it, hadn't even wanted to, but the headline stared up at her like it had been waiting. The bet that became a wife. How a dare made David Miller a farmer. She read it once, then again, then sat down very slowly. Words like wager, experiment, and rural project blurred on the page. There was a photo, an old one, of David from over a year ago, raising a glass in a glittering suit. Beside him, Jason, smirking. The caption, "Before the wedding, the game begins." Emily folded the paper neatly, placed it back in the box, then stood. Her breath felt sharp in her chest, but her hands were steady as she pulled on her coat. She didn't slam a door, didn't scream. She just moved, like someone walking away from a fire they didn't know was burning until the smoke reached their throat. Helen caught her by the front steps. "Where are you going?" Emily didn't stop. "The station." "Emily, he bet on me, Mum." Her voice was calm. Too calm. Helen followed, breath short. "That was before. And he never told me. That was after." Helen's voice softened. "You're not walking away from him. You're walking away from yourself." Emily turned, belly rising beneath her coat, hair loose and wild around her cheeks. "No," she said, "I'm walking toward whatever truth I still have." And then she kept walking. The bus stop outside of town sat crooked on cracked concrete, shaded by a lopsided oak tree. Emily lowered herself onto the wooden bench carefully, hands cradling her belly. The autumn air stung a little, but she didn't move. She just waited. The wind rustled cornfields nearby. She was trying not to cry, when she heard the sound of tires skidding on gravel. David's truck. He jumped out before the engine stopped, panic raw on his face. "Emily!" She didn't turn. He crossed the distance fast, crouched in front of her like she might disappear if he blinked. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't talk yet." He nodded, chest rising hard. The silence held for a long time. Then she looked at him, eyes rimmed red, voice a thread of something broken. "Am I a joke to you?" David's mouth opened, closed. Then, "No." She lifted the folded article from her coat pocket, handed it to him. "You didn't tell me. I was going to, but you didn't." He looked down, then up. "Because I was ashamed. Because it stopped being a game so quickly, I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like a liar." She blinked at him. "So I was real. After you realized I wasn't a joke?" "Yes." He didn't flinch. "And that makes me a coward. I know." Emily's hands were trembling now. "I loved you," she said. "From dirt under your nails to the way you whispered to our baby at night. I loved you like you were whole, even when I knew you weren't." David swallowed. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did." "I know." She looked away, voice smaller. "You picked me because I looked like someone who wouldn't fight back." He shook his head. "I picked you because I didn't know what real looked like until I saw you." Tears spilled over now, slow and quiet. "I can't undo this," David said, "but I'll carry it, every part of it. I'll carry the guilt, the shame, the fact that I let the worst version of me touch the best thing I ever had." She looked at him then, raw and tired. "I don't need a speech." He nodded. "I just needed the truth." David leaned forward, forehead resting gently against the edge of the bench near her knee. "Then here it is," he whispered. "You weren't the game. You were the reason I quit playing." Emily's breath hitched. They stayed like that, frozen in the stillness, until the bus rumbled up the road and hissed to a stop. She didn't move. The driver opened the door, checked his watch, then looked at her. "You getting on, Mom?" Emily didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on David. Finally, she whispered, "What now?" David stood slowly. "Now I walk, as far as it takes, even if you don't walk with me." The driver cleared his throat. Clocks ticking. Emily looked down at her belly, then back up at the man in front of her. She stood. "Let's walk," she said, voice rough. "But don't expect me to hold your hand yet." David nodded. "I wouldn't dare." They stepped away from the bench together, and the bus pulled off into the horizon, empty. The morning broke wet and heavy, rain tapping the windows like a second hand, counting down something Emily couldn't yet name. The clouds hung low over Greenville, the sky a soft, aching grey. Inside the farmhouse, the rooms felt hollow, as if something was about to arrive or unravel. Emily doubled over near the back door, one hand pressed against the wood frame. The first contraction hit like a jolt, sharp, deep, then gone too fast to believe it had been real. Then the second came. She gritted her teeth, gasped. "Mom!" Helen appeared from the hallway, towel in one hand, eyes already narrowing. "It's time," Emily said. Helen didn't ask, just moved. The town clinic was small and understaffed, but Dr. Ruth had been delivering babies in Greenville for 30 years. Her voice never rose, her hands never shook. "You're doing fine," she said, checking the monitor. "Just breathe with me, Emily." But Emily's breath came in broken stutters. "She should be here," she whispered. "He should be here." Helen sat on her left side, gripping her hand. "Then bring her here. Don't let him be the story. Let her be the light." Emily sobbed once, low and raw, and then bore down again. Outside, wind scattered leaves against the windows, rain curling down the glass in slow, heavy threads. Inside, the room was lit by a single lamp in the corner and the sharp, clean scent of antiseptic and lemon soap. The last push was the hardest. Emily screamed, guttural and deep, then silence, and then a cry, thin, fierce, alive. Dr. Ruth smiled. "You've got a daughter." They laid her on Emily's chest, still damp and wrinkled, a fist curled tightly near her face. Emily looked down at the baby and did not cry. She exhaled, then whispered, "Madeline." Dr. Ruth raised an eyebrow. "Beautiful name." Emily stroked the tiny forehead. "It means light. She'll carry what I couldn't." Helen squeezed her shoulder. For a while, there was only quiet, except for the soft, determined breath of a girl not yet an hour old. Across town, David's truck rolled to a stop in the clinic's parking lot. He looked like he hadn't slept. His clothes were still damp from the rain. One hand gripped the wheel long after the engine shut off. Through the glass doors, he could see the edge of the nurse's station. A woman in pale blue scrubs looked up, recognized him, and came around the counter. "I'm here for Emily Dawson," he said, voice low. The nurse hesitated. "She's fine. The baby's healthy." David nodded. "Can I see them?" She asked for no visitors. His stomach sank. "Not even..." She said not yet. He swallowed hard. "Could I leave something?" The nurse looked at him for a moment, then nodded. David reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. On the front, "For Emily Dawson." He handed it over. "Please," he said, "make sure she gets it." Emily read the letter hours later, when the baby had finally dozed off against her chest, warm and impossibly real. The handwriting was David's, careful, slanted, a little smudged in the corners. "Emily, I spent a lifetime building exits. Every room I walked into, I was already halfway out the door. That was survival. That was habit. And then I met you. You made the air different, heavier, yes, but worth breathing. I wasn't there today. I'll regret that until the day I can't count regrets anymore. And I don't expect forgiveness, but I will spend every day proving that I don't need your permission to love you right. I just need a chance to be close enough when you're ready. I've run my whole life, but I'm not running anymore." Emily folded the letter slowly, fingers lingering on the creases. Then she looked down at Madeline, still asleep, mouth slightly open, breath even. "You've got his lungs," she whispered. Outside, the rain had stopped. A single beam of afternoon sun slipped through the cloud cover, settling across the baby's blanket like a hush. Emily leaned back into the pillow, heart full and broken, and slowly healing. "You're not the beginning of a story," she said softly to Madeline. "You're the part where it turns to light." 10 years had passed, quietly and without ceremony. The mornings were colder now, more thoughtful somehow, as if the earth itself had aged alongside them. Autumn had folded itself neatly across the fields of Greenville, dusting the edges of leaves in gold and drying the air with a clean, honest chill. A wood stove crackled faintly inside the little house near the tree line, where smoke curled lazily up into a sky washed pale blue. David stepped outside in worn boots, balancing a bucket of chicken feed in one hand and a thermos of coffee in the other. The path from his small cedar house to Emily's farmhouse was worn soft now, walked every day for months. He didn't knock anymore. He didn't need to. Madeline spotted him through the kitchen window and pounded a tiny fist against the glass. "Mama, Papa's here!" David stepped in a second later, cheeks pink from the cold. "You're late," Emily said, handing him a towel. "I stopped to talk to the apple tree," he replied. She raised an eyebrow. It said I should hurry. She smirked and turned back to the stove. David's life had changed in quiet increments. No grand declarations, No newspapers screaming his name. Just a decision. One that stuck. He sold his last shares in Miller Tech 6 months ago, gave most of the proceeds away, bought a cottage with no driveway, no security system, no espresso machine. A place that hummed in the silence instead of filling it. Wallace had called once, bewildered. "They're calling you insane," he'd said. "Then maybe I've finally come to my senses." At noon, David picked up Madeline from the little preschool in town. He did this every day, rain or shine. He waited by the fence in a beat-up truck that smelled like hay and faintly of peanut butter crackers. Ava texted him once, months ago. "Is this really your life now?" He hadn't answered. There hadn't been a question in it. On Thursdays, David and Emily worked the garden behind her house. They were slow gardeners, more talk than progress, but neither of them minded. "This row's crooked," Emily said one afternoon, looking down at the beets. "Like most good things in life," David replied, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. They planted a tree together that fall. A Jonathan Alma, the same kind that had grown beside Emily's childhood porch. The roots were strong, the soil stubborn. "Why a tree?" she asked, leaning on the shovel. "Because it'll outlive me," he said, "and I want to leave something behind that isn't just paperwork and regrets." She looked at him. "You already did." He didn't answer, just smiled and pressed the last of the soil down around the base. Some evenings, David would write. Not for Madeline this time, but for himself. Small entries in a soft-bound notebook that smelled of dust and ink and coffee stains. "Today I fixed a fence without Googling it. Maybe tomorrow I'll learn how to fix the small cracks inside me too." Or, "Madeline called me Daddy today and then asked if cows could cry. I told her yes, and I'm still not sure if I meant it literally or not. It was on one of those quiet Sunday afternoons, after Madeline had fallen asleep on the rug with crayon marks on her fingers, that Emily asked him the question. They were sitting on the porch. The sun was low. The light was honey-thick. She didn't look at him when she said it. "So, if you're not a CEO anymore, not a headline, not someone people name drop, what are you now?" David didn't answer immediately. He watched a bird pick at the edge of the garden bed, tilted his head, then turned to her. "I'm a man lucky enough to be loved by 2 girls who never needed me rich," he said softly. "Just honest." Emily didn't smile. She nodded. "That's good," she said. He reached over, gently took her hand. "Sometimes," he added, "I still feel like I'm waiting for the crash. Like all this is too quiet to be real." "It's real," she said. "It's just slow. That's what it really feels like." He looked down at her fingers, calloused like his now. "I used to think slow meant failure." Emily tilted her head. "Now? Now I think it means I'm finally getting somewhere worth going." That night, David tucked Madeline in, kissed her forehead, and whispered a secret into her ear just before she fell asleep. "I used to build towers, kiddo. Now I build dinners and fences and jokes that make your mum roll her eyes." She giggled in her sleep. He stayed a moment longer. Then, later, when the house was quiet and only the crickets spoke, David sat by the apple tree under the stars. He pulled a fresh sheet of paper from his notebook and wrote, "Dear David, you were never the villain, just a man afraid of silence. You bought noise, lived inside of it, and called it life. But now you plant things you'll never live to harvest. You braid your daughter's hair and forget what time it is. You are not rich anymore. You are not important anymore. You're not the story anymore. You're just a man, and you're finally enough." He folded the paper carefully, tucked it into the back pocket of the journal. Above him, the sky held no towers, no lights, only stars, and the sound of something finally settling in place. The river moved slow and steady, its surface rippling like breath beneath the soft warmth of a late spring sun. Wildflowers flanked the edges of the grass clearing, no aisle, no arch, just wind through trees and the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface. The air smelled of lavender, fresh bread, and the distant smoke from a wood stove in someone's kitchen. David adjusted the collar of his linen shirt, still faintly wrinkled despite Emily's best efforts. His boots were dusted from walking the same trail he'd walked every day for 10 years, from his cabin to the house. He looked down at his hands, calloused, sun-worn, and smiled. Mandy elbowed him gently from the side. "You nervous?" David exhaled, watching the breeze play with the ends of the cloth napkins laid on the picnic table nearby. "Not nervous, just paying attention." "To what?" He turned toward the trail, eyes squinting into the sunlight. "To the moment before everything becomes memory." Mandy grinned. "Still poetic, I see. Just older," he said. Madeline came skipping down the path, a box in her hands. She was 10 now, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. Her hair was braided in 2 neat lines that had already started to unravel from play. "I have them," she said breathlessly. David knelt to meet her. "Let's see." She opened the small wooden shell she'd carved herself in art class, a cracked walnut lined with soft cloth. Inside lay 2 simple gold bands. No engraving, no diamonds, just circles, whole and quiet. "I wanted something from the trees," she said. It felt right. David touched the shell reverently. "It is." "Are you going to cry?" Madeline asked, eyebrow arched with the confidence of a child who'd seen grown-ups cry before. David chuckled. "I might. That okay with you?" She shrugged. "Depends how loud." He laughed again, then pulled her into a brief hug. "You've got your mum's heart." She pulled back, face suddenly serious. "Will it be different this time?" David nodded. "It already is." Emily arrived barefoot, the hem of her cotton dress brushing wild thyme. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands dancing across her cheeks. She carried a bouquet of kook dye and lavender, picked from the back field with Madeline earlier that morning. No veil, no music, no crowd, just 3 chairs, a weathered table, and the river watching. She stepped up beside David, their eyes meeting without needing to speak. Mandy stood off to the side with a small notebook. No priest, no official, just someone who'd seen it all, held their pain and their mending alike. "You ready?" she asked. David took Emily's hand. "Always." Mandy cleared her throat. "Then by the power vested in me by myself, and the damn miracle that is second chances, I say we begin." David looked at Emily and began, "I promise to love you in silence, in stubbornness, in soup spoons and stitched quilts. I won't promise perfection, but I will promise presence. I will not vanish. I will not run. I will learn your rhythms, even when they change, and I'll carry the light that came from the storm, not just the calm." Emily's eyes shimmered. She replied, "I don't need a hero. I don't need a fixer. I just need the man who showed up, over and over, even when he didn't know if I'd let him stay. I need your hands, and your mornings, and your quiet when mine gets loud. I need your laugh beside the coffee pot, and your promise to never let a bet write our story again." David reached for the walnut shell, and Madeline stepped forward, solemn now, placing it in his hands like it weighed something sacred. He handed one ring to Emily. She slid it onto his finger slowly. He slid the other onto hers. No applause, just the hush of a breeze curling around them, folding time like paper. Afterward, they sat on a quilt by the riverbank, plates filled with roasted corn, peach pie, and soft bread passed between hands. Mandy told a terrible joke. Helen, older now, but steady as ever, poured sweet tea into mason jars and said nothing, but her eyes never left her daughter. Madeline chased butterflies barefoot, her laugh echoing through the clearing. David watched her, his heart full in a way that didn't thrum with urgency anymore. Just warmth, gentle, steady, like roots growing deep. He leaned toward Emily. "This isn't what I imagined my life would look like." She raised a brow. "Is that a complaint?" "It's gratitude," he said. "In disguise." She smiled and kissed his shoulder. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in bruised orange and rose, David walked Madeline back toward the house. She held his hand, swinging their arms between them. "Dad?" she asked. "Yeah?" This time, no one laughed at me. David looked down at her, voice low, certain. "No one ever should have, Princess." She leaned her head against his arm. "Good." They walked the rest of the way in silence. Behind them, the apple tree swayed softly, its branches heavy with the first signs of fruit. A promise planted long ago. Now it was blooming. And somewhere beyond, the river kept moving, slow, sure, and shining. What did this story mean to you? For me, it was a quiet reminder that love isn't built in grand gestures, but in small, consistent choices. Showing up, staying, listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of David and Emily's journey spoke to you the most, and what lesson did you take away from it? Please leave your thoughts in the comment.